Hey guys, what's up? Alec Torelli. I had a conversation yesterday with a friend of mine. He's become a friend, but someone that I've been mentoring, a college student. And it was really interesting because he's taking all these different classes, studying all these different things, and he's wondering about like what's the most important thing that he could learn. And like what's the one skill I think is the most important. And so I thought about it, and there's a lot of good candidates, right? There's something like communication, your ability to articulate a thought, your ability to write, because then you can express ideas and share them with other people. But really, when it comes down to it, these skills take for granted something that we have as a society that we're really lucky to have, and that is a free society. And in order to have that, you need to have a population that is capable of thinking critically. So you need a population that can think and that knows history well enough to not repeat the mistakes of the past so that we don't lead ourselves down a hole we don't want to go to, where we make decisions collectively that inhibit those freedoms and that take those freedoms away and that remove us from a society where there's an abundance of opportunity. And living in a democratic society is one of the biggest blessings. And we take that for granted largely in the West, that like this is just normal. And so we don't really necessarily put enough value on critical thinking, and we think like, oh, well, I'm going to learn a specialized skill. But that takes for granted the first principle that we need to have a free society in order to be able to pursue any of these other goals. So the most important thing you can learn in school, whether it's elementary school, middle school, grade school, high school, or college, is ability to think. The ability to not follow blindly everything you're told, but to question everything and to understand how to reason from first principles. First principles means the idea to distill something down to its essence and ask a fundamental question. So something I've been exploring a lot lately, if you've watched this channel, is what is money? So, you can say something like superficial or shallow, like money is cash. Money is what you use to transact. But that's not a first principle understanding of what money actually is. If you really get down to its essence, money is bottled up time in a way that can be exchanged from one person to another. That is a first principle definition of what money actually represents. It represents the time it takes to accrue that money to then be able to transfer it to other people at will. So that's what money is. And once you understand that, you go down the rabbit hole further and understand the principles of money, the characteristics of money, and you ultimately get to gold and Bitcoin, right? But that's first principle reasoning. So it's really important to be able to do this as a tool to be able to think critically, because that creates a population that cannot be manipulated, controlled, or that makes decisions that doesn't understand why they're doing it or understand where those decisions are likely to lead. So aside from critical thinking, history is probably the single most important thing you can study. Because if we don't, the further you look into the past, it's said by Winston Churchill, the further you can see into the future. And frankly, we live in a time where we've had it so good for so long that I remember growing up in school thinking like, why am I learning about history? I want to focus on the future. Very ignorant thing to think about, to say. But we live in such a good time where we've never had hardship. Like if you're growing up and you're a millennial, your life was good all the time. And even your parents' generation probably had it good most of the time. So it's not until we get to our great-grandparents' generation where they remember the tragedies and difficulties and challenges around World War II. So what typically happens is in the span of 3 or 4 generations, people forget the lessons that their great-grandparents lived through and the hard times that they went through. And so they end up making the same mistakes of the past, and these cycles sort of repeat. So it's a funny thing I heard the other day where hard times produce strong men, strong men produce good times produce weak men, and weak men produce hard times. So we've lived through multiple generations of going through this cycle where the hard times produced strong men in World War II. And since then, we've had strong men producing good times, good producing weak men, and now we have weak men producing hard times. Not to say only men produce this, but it's just an adage. But anyway, it's really important to learn how to think critically and learn the lessons of history, because then we are not doomed to make the mistakes of the past. Otherwise, we're just a bunch of sheep.